everyone, Jolene here from Bookworm Adventure Girl. Welcome back. If you are new, thanks for checking out my channel. Today we are going to be talking about half of the books I read in June. I read 10 books in June, but 5 of those books were for the Mondays with Margaret series. So if you are interested in Margaret Atwood books, then please check out that playlist. I will leave a link to those videos in the description box below. That leaves us with 5 books for me to talk about today, and they are, as usual, a mix of genres and authors. If you've been watching my channel, then you already know that I like to highlight Canadian literature, and 4 out of 5 of the books are by Canadian authors, but all of them with very different backgrounds. Plus, all of the books are just very different in themselves. So I have a political thriller, a memoir, an Indigenous book, a humor book, and then a collection of short stories. So I'm going to start with the non-Canadian author. And the first book I read in June was part of a group read with Rainier from Rainier Books. And I took part in his post-Soviet book club that he's hosting. And the book that we read was Untraceable by Sergei Lebedev. And this is translated from the Russian by, I think it's Antonina, Bouis. This is a political thriller about a chemist named Kalatin, who in his former life worked for the Russian government, attempting to develop an untraceable poison with no antidote. And after creating what they end up calling neophyte, and as the Soviet Union is beginning to collapse, Kalatin leaves his country, hoping to continue working someplace else. And even though he now has a new identity, he's changed his name and his entire appearance, and it's many years later, he learns that the Russian Secret Service have finally caught up to him. They have found him and they want to get rid of him. This novel for me started off really slow. My favorite part was Kalatin's backstory and how and why he became a chemist. And I didn't find there to be anything like too compelling in the story. But in all fairness, this is not a typical book that I would read, which is why I joined the group, you know, to kind of go outside my reading comfort zone a bit. So this is a book I would never have picked up on my own, but I am glad that I was, you know, part of the group and that we read it together, and that we'll be starting the next book. We'll be starting that this week. And so a big thanks to Rainier for putting this on my radar, and I will leave a link to Rainier's channel in the description box below so you can check that out, or join us even for our next read, and we'll be focusing on the Ukraine. So up next is a memoir called Remembering by Clarke, and this memoir started off so good. I was really interested in learning about Clarke. He's not someone I knew a lot about. He is a Canadian writer, originally from Barbados, who came to Canada in 1955. And for some reason, I never learned about him until the last couple of years. And I read his novel, The Polished Hoe, last year as a buddy read. And although it was not a book that I particularly enjoyed, I did appreciate learning a little bit more about the novel and Clarke's own thoughts on it, which he shared in the memoir. So this is a great book to learn about racism in Canada, the experience of immigrants in Canada, and also about being a Black writer in Canada. I found what Clarke had to say about those topics in particular were very interesting, and it was enlightening. Plus, he knew a lot of people, and he rubbed elbows with a lot of influential people, partly because it was through his job as a journalist, and he was a broadcaster for CBC, but also as a writer, and his love of music, and then also in his work in the civil rights movement. So here's the thing, where the memoir kind of went off the rails for me was with all of the rants. So one rant I can see maybe even 2 rants, okay? But I lost count of how many rants there were, and several times I found myself thinking or even saying out loud on occasion, when is this going to end? And after a while, all of the rants felt like the same rant over and over again, and I found myself zoning out a little too often, and it made the book so incredibly long. So for the last 100 pages, probably more, I dreaded having to read more, and I really felt like it was never going to end. Thankfully, it did end, but the book was way too long for me. So if you are interested in racism in Canada, the civil rights movement, for those things, check it out. But I would also say that there are probably better books about those subjects to probably check out as well. So next up was my book club book, and that was One Brother Shy by Terry Fallis. And Terry Fallis is a Canadian writer who writes these funny, lighthearted, feel-good books, and this is the 4th book that I've read by him. First, it has one of the best dedications ever. The dedication reads, "For my identical twin brother Tim, had I known I was going to write this novel next, I wouldn't have dedicated No Relation to You." So I thought that was a great dedication and also shows Fallis's humor. I love the play on words with the title, which makes sense if you read the book. And the protagonist is Alex McCaskill, who is a talented software engineer. He's socially awkward and just wants to basically go through life invisible. Alex carries around the weight of a very unfortunate event that happened when he was a teenager, and he is a caregiver to his dying mother. And when she dies, Alex's life changes. The story takes us from Canada to England to Russia as Alex tries to find out who he really is, and in the process learns the importance of other people in his life. I did like how the story is written in a way that you have like a front row seat to Alex's thoughts, whether he says them or not. So sometimes, it was humorous how he would edit his thoughts. And if you like feel-good stories that just seamlessly plug along, then you will really like this book. This was not one of my favorites of Fallis's books because everything happened too easily, in my opinion. Yes, I know his mother dies at the beginning, and that's sad, but it really is used to set the story up, and then the story doesn't really have another moment where there's really any tension or a climax, so that was a bit of a disappointment for me. However, the message is good. The message I got from it is that, people often let things hold them back from living their lives and their experiences, thoughts, fears, and whatever it is that's holding them back, and we can't live our best lives until we let those things go. So I will always recommend Terry Fallis, so I would say it's worth a read, but the other books I've read by him have been better, and if he is a new author to you, then maybe don't start with this one. Try one of his others. The 4th book I read was Noopiming, The Cure for White Ladies by Leanne Batasamosake, Simpson. The timing of reading this book probably couldn't have been any better. I absolutely loved the language. It is very poetic, very lyrical, and the format is also really unique, and the storytelling is probably not something that the majority of readers are used to, myself included. And like I said, the format is a little different. I will show you some of the pages and how it looks on the page. So there are some longer ones as well, but so you can see that it's not written like a regular novel. So it was actually a quicker read than you might expect. And I admit that I did have to use the back a lot to reference the characters. So I will read a bit of what it says here. So it actually talks about the different characters. So Akiwenzi, the old man, Ninatig, the maple tree, Mindy Muyen, the old woman, Sabe, the giant, Attic, the caribou, Sin the human, and Lucy the human. So I kept having to go back to this to make sure that I had the right character when I was reading. So I thought that that was really neat, and I was glad that it was there. So this is one of those books that I can tell you what I think it's about, but if I were to read it again today, I think that I would get something different from it again. And my guess is that each person would get something different from it. If you've been following the Mondays with Margaret series, then you know that Atwood writes about Susanna Moodie, actually quite a bit, and has mentioned Moody's book, Roughing It in the Bush. So Noopiming is Anishinaabemowin for In the Bush, and this book was written in response to that memoir. So I read this book while I was at the cabin in the bush, and then I read it again just a few days before Canada Day, which for us is July 1st. And you can read it in one sitting, but I wanted to let a few things kind of resonate within me for a few days. And as many of you may know, this Canada Day has been very different for our country, and many people have chosen to reflect on not only our past, but our future and how we can walk alongside our Indigenous brothers and sisters. So the investigations at the former residential schools have been incredibly difficult, and they have at this point found over 1,500 unmarked graves at residential schools, and there are still over 100 residential schools that can be, and I think should be, investigated. So the words on the back that were most powerful for me and that I really took to heart were these. To read Simpson's work is an act of decolonization, de-gentrification, and willful resistance. It is a breaking open of the self to a world alive with people, animals, ancestors, and spirits, who are all busy with the daily labors of healing. Healing not only themselves, but their individual pieces of the network, of the web that connects them all together. Enter and be changed. So if you're interested in that, if you're interested in being an ally for Indigenous people, then I highly recommend this. And I believe that, some of the first steps are to feel a little uncomfortable. So no, it doesn't look or sound the same as a regular novel, but it's really not supposed to. And I would suggest being, patient with it. It's okay if you don't understand everything. And so maybe just give it some time, do a reread or revisit a few times. We don't have to understand all of it all at once. But I do believe that by reading this and other stories or books like it, that we can begin to learn and understand and heal. So the last book that I read in June was this short story collection by Pei Vio. Some of you may already know Pei from his channel Attention. If you don't, I will leave a link to his channel in the description box. So please be sure to check it out, because you're missing out if you don't know about Pei. So Pei was kind enough to send me a copy of his book like forever ago, and I finally read it. The collection is called Searching for Marilyn, Monroe, and it's divided into 3 sections, stories, parables, and animals. And if I were to describe the collection and Pei's writing in one word, it would be clever. It turns out that Pei can really write and can write really well. So in the first section, stories, there are 5 short stories, beginning with the longest story and the title story. And I like how Pei developed this story and the protagonist. I thought it was very well done. I especially liked 53, which plays with the relationship between reader, writer, and the characters in a story. And there are themes of war, facing our own mortality, some Greek mythology, and facing crisis. And the last short story, Fleck, probably has even deeper meaning now than when it was first written, especially with the pandemic. So Pei's writing has that quality of being able to have relevance in any time and can be looked at from new perspectives, which I always say is a sign of a good writer. So the second section, called Parables, is exactly as the title suggests, stories that are maybe 1 to 2 pages long. and they all start off as like these straightforward stories, but they are stories that eventually have great depth and profound meaning. And in these, there are themes of free will, broken spirits, literature, the importance of art, humanity being self-destructive, especially with our own desires, and our relationship to nature. And then the final section, animals, is like prose poetry with a bit of philosophy, which of course I love because I majored in philosophy. So again, I thought that these were so well written, and I was so happy to finally read this. So thanks so much, Pei, for sending this along, as it turned out to be one of my top reads this month. And I hope that you will write more. I would love to, or to publish more. I would love to read a novel that you've written. No pressure with that, though. So these are the 5 books that I read in June. Please let me know if you have read any of these or if any of them are on your TBR pile. I would love to know your thoughts. Also, let me know what you read in June. Did you have a favorite or maybe even a least favorite? I'm always happy to hear about that too. I look forward to chatting with you in the comments. Thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and don't forget to make every day an adventure.